The squeeze is real. We all feel it. Faster, faster, faster. More, more, more. React, respond, react, respond, react, respond. The machinification of humanity is in full force, and we feel powerless to resist. What if we stopped resisting and started delegating, feeding our most hated work to the machines, creating process for the stuff that saps our soul, leaving more room for what truly makes us human? This is Alane Boyd's superpower. As co-founder of Workday Ninja, she helps teams automate drudgery, systematize repetitive tasks, and climb out of the oppressive grind to do the best work of our lives. The key to all of it? Finding the right tools for the job. We get this so wrong in the ad industry so often. We slap new tools like duct tape onto our sickly systems, hoping they'll magically heal what ails us. Alane prefers a saner, more strategic approach, carefully studying the way a company works to determine the right solution. We talked about using AI to reduce tedious work by up to 40%, freeing up time for creative and strategic tasks. The importance of consistent company-wide processes versus individual methods that lead to chaos. And how to create a systematized approach to onboarding for the 84% of small businesses who are not ready for an employee's first day. I had to look up onboarding in the dictionary because I'm not sure I've ever experienced it in my 25 plus years in the ad agency world. Want to make that world less crazy and more creative? Listen to Alane. Here she is. Alane Boyd, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Thank you, TJ. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. It's going to be a fun conversation. I would love, before we dive too deep, to just give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself and maybe tell a little bit about what you do for work and how you came to be doing it.
Yeah, I'll try to be to the point on all of that. So, well, I'm Alane Boyd. I'm the co-founder of Workday Ninja, and I started this company. So we help companies implement automation and AI, utilize a project management system like Asana, ClickUp, Monday, and really just become more efficient where a lot of time is lost. And I started this company coming out of exiting my previous company when I got bored in retirement, and just really thought about my purpose in life, what I really enjoyed about building my other company, so that I made sure that I really enjoy. If I was going to come out of retirement, I really wanted to make sure I enjoyed the work that I did and build a company that I was proud of.
What was the previous company you were working for? What was that?
We built a social media and reputation agency for car dealerships. And along those 10, 11 years of building it, I also built 2 SaaS platforms within the company. So when I exited, the company bought all 3.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. I've spent a fair amount of time in the automotive world on the ad agency side. And so the dealer networks and the dealer world is a tough space. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done there. So that's awesome that you were helping things along, particularly on the social side. I think that's a tough space sometimes for dealers.
Yeah, we were the perfect time and place to start this company and do this. When we started, we had almost no competition because we were so early to the game, and we exploded because of a meeting with one dealership. We're like, we do social media for car dealerships, and the guy's like, okay, I've been kind of hearing about Facebook and probably should be on there. And he ended up being a part of a huge dealership group and went to an all general manager meeting with all of them. And the owner was like, what is this social media thing? We need to be on it. And the dealership was like, raised his hand. He's like, I know somebody that does this. And, I think that's, luck, definitely, but that we were there. We were out there talking about what we were doing. We provided a very niche solution to something that people weren't doing yet. And I remember I was trying to find a software platform for managing hundreds of accounts at a time. And when we
Mhm.
first started, there wasn't anything. Like Hootsuite was big,
Yeah.
but it couldn't handle efficiently managing this many dealerships. And so
Mhm.
we were really progressive in what we were trying to do.
Yeah. I love the entrepreneurial spirit that shows up in a lot of what you've done here. And it makes me wonder. I've asked this question of other folks. What role does work play in your life?
I call it my hobby
Yeah.
at this point. Oh my gosh. When I didn't have work, I realized a piece of me I lost because
Mhm.
I needed to have purpose. I needed a reason to make a change in people's lives. And for
Mhm.
me, that was improving their day and their work day. And I knew that I had this ability and just sitting around. I thought I was in retirement. I had these like big ideas of hanging out with my young son, which I did a lot of
Mhm.
after exiting. We would go for huge walks. I'd go to the park, but I just really suffered from the idea of being a stay-at-home mom during that time. And
Mhm.
I needed fulfillment outside of that. And so what I love about entrepreneurship is, especially at that point, I had the option to,
Mhm.
how much I wanted to work, how much I wanted to do, and I could grow into this company as as much or as little as I wanted to while he was still young. Now he's 9 and he doesn't care about me. He wants to hang out with his friends and
Yeah,
rollerblade and skateboard and do all kinds of
of
cool stuff. So
course.
he doesn't need me as much.
Well, I love that mindset, and it's always interesting to see how different people connect to work. I mean, I think there's such a wide range of like on one extreme, it's kind of like it's just a job, it's a
Hmm.
means to money, and I'm not dismissing that. It's just for some people that's where it shows up, and for others, it's like the other extreme is like my whole life is work
Yeah.
at the cost of everything else. And it's always fun to see where people fit along that continuum. But one thing that shows up a lot is that, as you described that, it was like it's a means of expressing a piece of you.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily expressible in other areas. So, like some
Hmm.
kind of uh, goal, mission oriented thing that you can put that into is really helpful. Does that sound right for you?
Absolutely. And being an entrepreneur, you can define what that is. And
Mm-hmm.
even with my other company, I got to a point where I didn't enjoy that work. And that work felt like work.
Yeah.
And I had just evolved that company where I had a very large team across the world in an industry that I wasn't passionate about.
Mm.
Early on, it was fun and exciting and social media. And
Yeah.
then you grow it to a certain point, you're like, actually, I don't care if that car dealership gets a 5-star review or not. And I don't particularly enjoy this industry. So, what is
Yeah.
my plan? And, that's the other thing that I think as entrepreneurs that we don't realize that we have options.
Mm.
We can change our business model. We can sell our company. We can do all kinds of things to evolve it to what we want to do.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I know from my perspective, I'm still newish in the entrepreneurial space, meaning I've been doing my coaching practice for about 2.5 years full time, and that realization has been slowly making its way into my brain. I think, and I think that's probably true for a lot of folks. Like you kind of feel like you're locked in,
Mhm.
and you just don't realize like you're the one you're making these choices and you can make new choices, and yeah, you might need to do some work to pivot or whatever you need to do,
Right.
but you get to do that work. So
Yeah. And it is scary. I
yeah,
I
it
know
is.
it's scary and you lose sleep over making changes and doing things, and I've lost plenty of sleep, but what I've always figured out is that even though it might be a hard decision, you have a decision to make and a change
Mhm.
that you can make and you're going to figure it out. Like I think at the what I realized eventually in my other company is even if the worst case scenario happens, I am
Mhm.
not going to be living on the streets.
Right.
I will always land on my feet, even if I'm, almost all the way to the floor on them,
Mhm.
is that, my worst case scenario that I'm still going to pull out of. And so that was really helpful for me to
Yeah.
get through those scary situations where I did want to make a change. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. But for
Mhm.
me, my mental health, my physical health, because if I'm sitting here working all day and not moving around, that is not good for our physical being, and
Yeah.
that's going to affect us as we age.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to flip to the side of work where it doesn't always feel great. This is the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
curious
I've been in
from
that
you.
sucky stage.
What was the suckiest point in your work experience?
I've had two, and it
Mm,
was built in my company. One of them, I mean, it was, work did suck because I told you how fast we grew, and I
mhm,
was young. I was mid to late 20s.
mm,
I had other very minimal companies that I was basically a solopreneur for. I didn't
mhm.
know anything about really managing a team. I'd
Yeah.
really never worked for anybody else. I had some small jobs out of college, and then I just realized like I just want to do my own thing. So experience wise, I was figuring everything out myself. My business partner and I were trying to figure out scaling
Mm,
at the same time that we were trying to scale. Like we didn't have any wiggle room. We were just exploding so fast. And so the days sucked when we didn't have anything in place to support our team. We didn't have a project
mhm,
management system. We didn't have a knowledge base. For too many years, I was the knowledge base,
mm.
where we had a few things. But when you're the institutional knowledge, man, then you can't do anything else because
Yeah.
everybody has to go to you to get the information.
Mm. It's interesting you bring that up because I come from the ad agency world. I know you work a fair amount with those folks, and um, I've talked to a couple people who express something along the lines of we are terrible at keeping, maintaining, evolving our institutional knowledge. So it's like project done, project done, project done. Did we learn anything
Mhm.
from it? I don't know. Maybe something snuck in there, but by and large, I don't think so. You
Yeah.
know, um, why do you think? I would say this may be true of companies in general, but I know in advertising it's true. Like, what is the barrier to respecting the need for that institutional knowledge and applying the amount of effort and resources to therefore create and maintain it?
Yeah. I've thought about this question so much. And I think one side is if you're in an agency, you're a creative thinker and
Mhm.
you're hiring creative thinkers. The operation side of things burns you out and it burns
Yeah.
me out. And I think the biggest luck, blessing, anything you want to call it that I had is I had a business partner that would rather build operations than do anything else. And
Mm,
I'm like, let's just sell whatever, like we'll figure the rest out later. And eventually what happened is we were doing more of my mentality because we were just trying to survive. And I think that's
mm,
a lot of margins are also similar, very slimmer with a lot of agencies. So
yeah.
you're seeing these things as an expense rather than a value
Mm,
early on. And
yeah.
so, that was and time is a resource and you don't have a lot of
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
And so companies are looking at this like how we can barely survive what we're doing. How are we going to do this? And
Hmm.
we had, we can talk about what I did. I know you had a specific question of why I think agencies fall into this hole.
Hmm.
Um, is we had a plan to get ourselves out. And that was because my business partner one day said, we are burning our team out. We are going through employees way too fast. We're feeding them to the wolves and they're getting eaten for the most part. And in order to survive, we had to change how our operations were. It was just like we weren't going to be able to keep up with what we were doing because I couldn't
Mm,
keep training people at the same speed we needed to grow.
yeah. Mm. Well, I hope there's room for folks to kind of learn a little bit from that and figure out how to make that more of a common effort in agencies. I think it's just you find yourself frustrated sometimes, right? You get to a point and you're like, this feels eerily familiar. We should know how to deal with this, but yet we're scrambling, you know. And on that note of things kind of not feeling great in the workspace, I want to ask you another question because you're out there working with a lot of folks. So I imagine you're seeing and hearing a lot of people's perspectives on work and how it feels right now. What is your take on the state of work right now? If there was a suck meter, and it was like it really sucks beyond belief, or it's perfectly beautiful, where is it falling right now?
Gosh, I will say company size is dependent on that.
Mm,
The
okay.
smaller the company, the more sucky it is. And the
Interesting.
less willing what I see. And I just got off a call right before this, and he's got all the pain points, but an unwillingness to change. And I'm thinking, why did you even book this call? Like, we're just both wait. Like, you actually asked to book a call with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, you don't have a willingness to change.
Mm,
And it's because, and then I was talking to my business partner too after that call. I'm like, it is always the size of the company
hmm.
on how much work sucks.
Yeah.
Because when it's smaller, the pain points are there, but it isn't enough for them to make a change. And so the
Mm,
suck meter is higher. The
yeah.
larger they get, the more saturated they are. And finally, they're at a breaking point where they're like, something has to change, or I am not going to make it as a human being anymore. The
Mm,
stress is too high. I hate what I'm doing. My team is burnt out. I just want things to work again. And that I want things to work again. They're framing how it used to be when they were small.
yeah. Mm,
When it was just maybe them and an executive assistant or something, where
hmm.
they're small enough where they're still doing the work
Yeah.
and doing the sales, and everything was in their head, so they were able to execute a lot faster.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of smaller agencies, like it can feel like things are okay, maybe because you're so in it, and it may also feel more personal when the question comes, hey, are you willing to change to make this work better? It's like, well, now you're sort of you're attacking me almost, because I'm the one sort of with my hands in everything. And that's got
Hmm.
to be a hard thing for, I would imagine, entrepreneurs across any space where you get to that, I don't know where that number is, but some number where suddenly it's like we have to move back a little bit and allow systems to do what we've done.
Yeah.
And that seems terrifying probably to a lot of folks. Is there anything that seems to help people like have a little bit of an aha moment of like, oh, okay, you're not attacking me. You're just telling me we've crested over some magical point, and therefore I will burn out if I keep trying
Yeah.
to do this.
I mean, I can talk from my own experience because I was my small customer,
Yeah.
back then. And I had an ego problem of letting go. It's also, you're so worried about all the work that you've done to get these clients
Mm-hmm.
and the relationships you've built. They respect you and what you've built, and letting go of that and putting it in somebody else's hands. I was so scared. I held on to clients much longer than I should. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember, I have such a vivid memory. I was traveling for work, and I was getting emailed all day from our
Mm-hmm.
huge multi-million dollar contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't get to them that day, and I didn't want them to know I was working at midnight. So I wrote every single email and I scheduled it to send at 7 a.m. the next morning so that they wouldn't know that I was overburdened and
Yeah.
working on their stuff in the middle of the night. So
Mm.
I was that person.
Yeah.
I had hero syndrome where I needed to be the hero for my clients and I needed to be
Mm-hmm.
the hero for my employees,
Yeah.
and fear of losing what I had built.
Mm.
And those things were more important until it wasn't. And it's always when you get enough employees to where you can't do everything. You just
Mm-hmm.
can't. Like, there's no
Yeah.
possible way to do it all. And I usually see it around 20 employees
Mm.
where that's
Okay.
the aha moment, because you've been slacked all day. You've been text messaged, you've been called, and so many days you're realized all I did was answer teams questions. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't actually get to work on my business. I didn't get to the 20 things that I actually had on my to-do list. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the breaking point for a founder.
Yeah. Mm. I wonder if sometimes the challenge is like on the one side there's the pain point. It's like, when does that pain get strong enough and you get to that 20 plus people and you start to realize you can't do it. And then there's the sort of more personal human side of like, who am I as a leader if I'm not all in the business now? Like, what value do I get to bring? I imagine that can be scary for folks where it's like, oh, I have to rethink how I create value in this company. Does that ever show up in the conversations? And do you have any point of view that you share in that perspective?
Oh yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I had to grapple with that too. As well, they all think I'm a badass right now because I can do all of these things, and you know, I don't want to lose that. I don't want them to feel like I'm just this loser over here that's just raking money in. And so I had to grapple with that, and we do see it on the client side too, where one client comes to mind that and they're like, yes, I'm all in and I want to do this. And we build out the proof of concepts of what it's going to look like. And then they're like, oh, whoa, hold on a minute. Like, they're roller coastering in their head because they get to the point that, okay, I can't let this go. And, oh, wait, I can't do it. And I think one thing that I've seen helps is if you are a founder that has that issue is you don't need to be the only one doing this for building things out. Don't be on, if you're having anxiety about how things are going to happen, but you want to get out of the day-to-day, stop putting yourself in the day-to-day. Get your managers, your team leads on the projects that they need to get, whether it's a call with us where we're helping build out the workflow, or you have a strong operations person, take yourself out, because as long as you keep putting yourself in there, you are still controlling everything.
Another thought came to me. I imagine you experienced this too, but I know in smaller agencies, at least, one of the big selling points you often bring up is all of the top leaders are working in the business. Like, we're not going to hand you off to like junior teams, blah, 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 like those big folks over there. And suddenly you're stepping into a space where like you kind of are. Meaning, and it's not that you're handing people off to like people with 2 years of experience. You've probably hired people with great experience, but you have to think about how you sell yourself. Your story has to change. Is that something that shows up in the work you do as well?
Not as much with the work that we do. I can identify that as, me and my progress with my previous company. I don't see that as much. And I think most of the time that we have a client ready to work with us, they've already started to disassociate from that feeling.
Okay.
And where they've had some key team members that are leading some of the account management or key relationships and things like that. But for me, I laugh because it was so terrible for me to let go of those big contracts, and how, they bought me at the time and my experience and my expertise. And I had to for me to let go for those big contracts, I had to groom somebody, and I had to hire I didn't have the right fit on my team currently. I had to hire an outsider, and they started as an executive high-level assistant so that she could start building the relationship with me, so that when I transitioned off of those, that it wasn't scary for the client. And I don't know if that was the best way, it worked and it was fine. Now, could I have hired somebody well-respected in the industry already and put them in place? Probably so. And I think the harder part on those kind of decisions is the budget to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky, because sometimes, certainly again, with the slim margins in agency world, like you don't always have the money to bring in the higher paid support. Yeah, I want to move on from that to agency life in general. That's definitely the world I come from, and a lot of the listeners here are going to be perhaps from that world. And the first word that comes to mind when I think of agency life is chaotic. Even the best agencies have a bit of that. And there's probably like a sweet spot where there's just enough chaos that it sort of fuels the creativity. And but most agencies crest well above that. And it just feels like I don't have time to think. I'm just constantly like moving stuff off my plate. Um, how does the work you do help alleviate some of that? And how do sort of creative minds that exist in agencies, how can you help them embrace the idea of systems and process?
Yeah. One of our taglines we use is from chaos to clarity, because chaos is definitely the state
Yeah.
of mind of
Mm-hmm.
agencies. And, that was one thing I actually had to learn is, when is a system over processed and
Mm-hmm.
detracting from creativity,
Yeah.
and where's the process falling to help keep things consistent, that clients still get a high level of care, and that people can still see what the next steps are without feeling like they're being burdened with tedious little things. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I think there's one way is just like a high level workflow is, what is the status and while it moves along. So an example is, if you have a podcast and where are you in the workflow? Okay, well, the first part is that you have a topic and you're going to record this topic on this day. And
Mm-hmm.
then once it's done, then it moves to the next stage of the workflow, which is editing and
Mm-hmm.
production work on it. Okay,
Yeah.
well, that doesn't detract from the creativity that needs to happen, but it
Mm-hmm.
says the stage and then what needs to happen. Okay, well, we need YouTube shorts created. We need the ums clipped out. We need, these
Mm-hmm.
things, and more like kind of like a checklist in that workflow. Okay, well, then after that, all right, great, let's move that over. And then we need the design work done. We need the thumbnails and the social media posts written. Okay, that's the next thing. And then the next thing would be validation if there's an approval process and that
Mm-hmm.
gets assigned. There could be a loose workflow that at least identifies what needs to happen. It doesn't say that it needs to have a purple border with yellow writing and
Mm-hmm.
has 3/4 worth of imagery versus text. Like we don't have to
Right.
get detailed in those things, but like, let's just make sure we don't forget anything. That's the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's important. I think um, I've probably discovered its importance a little more since I've left the agency world and do all of this kind of stuff on my own without any process supporting it. And I've had to kind of experiment and create some of my own process, which has been both fun and illuminating. I think I would have described myself as a sort of typical creative who hates process until I became until I started my own business, and I was like, oh, now I get there is good process that I need, but it's invisible to you sometimes in agency, right? Because if process is good, you don't notice it.
Yeah.
You really only notice process when it's interfering with you and it's feeling like it's oppressing you and making it hard to be creative and it's getting in the way, or so how is part of the effort you need to do to help people see that value because they may be resistant to it.
Yeah. So a lot of times, especially if it's a manager or an owner that's bringing us in and the team thinks, oh my gosh, this is meant to micromanage me. They're trying to
Yeah.
micromanage. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the opposite. We don't want to micromanage. Like, we just want you to know what you need to do.
Yeah.
And have it consistent, because TJ's way of doing things and Alane's way of doing things is two different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's build out what's the company way of doing things, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
it incorporates both of our ways
Yeah.
into a one way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And when and the other pieces too that really adds to the chaos is when you have an employee leave
Mm.
and you feel the pain. So,
Yeah.
TJ, it's like like you said, like it's an invisible process that
Mm-hmm.
people don't know the full gamut of what needs to be done because
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't been documented. It's not being followed. And then hiring and replacing that person just became 10 times harder.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. I've seen that with some folks I talk to in my business where process ends up becoming, like you said, like it's it's just like my way of doing things is the process because it defaulted to that because there was no universal agency led process put in place, or it's this team created kind of its own process and this team created its own way of doing things. And then that one person leaves who takes away all that institutional knowledge we were talking about. And yeah, it's like, wait, why isn't this working? Oh, they're the ones who did X, Y, and Z. I don't know what to do now.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a lot of value in that. And what I wonder, and this is probably what, certainly from the creative team side, that people are probably craving the most is if you get a well-defined process in place and it's operationalized well, can it actually give me a little more time to think and create? Like, is that a realistic expectation from this kind of work?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one thing that I talk about a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
that we need more time to be creative and strategic.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, if we're the visionary for the work that's getting done, we
Mm-hmm.
don't need to be burdened with all the steps to get it done. And that's what I really love about what we do and the team that I've built, is that I get to be the visionary.
Mm-hmm.
I get to say, this is a general idea of how I want it to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And then I give it to my team to figure out what's all the steps, who's the right person to do it. And then
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do all of that, because getting burnt out and trying to do the operations tasks and be the visionary, I'm saturated, and I'm not being my best self. And so if you're in a creative role, that's where
Mm-hmm.
you want to spend your time,
Yeah.
not on, oh, I forgot to do this. Now I'm over here doing this. Now I'm over here doing this. We've got a fire over here. This client's pissed off because we didn't do it right the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can picture many examples where we were sort of in this mode of like spending half of our meetings talking about how we're doing something versus doing the thing, and how frustrating it is. It's like, well, if we just do it this way, and okay, if we move this here and do this, as opposed to just like, all right, go do what you do. And so I can see how if you can get that running a little more smoothly, it does create room. Another question I was thinking of here, you mentioned some of the programs you work with. I think you mentioned Monday, ClickUp, and Asana.
Mm-hmm.
So something a lot of folks may wonder, because somebody's out there working with Asana right now and they feel like their life is miserable, or Monday, or ClickUp. I'm not calling any brand out. How do you, first of all, do you ever encounter that where somebody's like, God, I worked with that and I didn't like it at all? And then how do you show them that there's a better way to work with it so that it actually serves you instead of getting in the way?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I keep laughing because your questions are so spot on. You're really just hitting the nail on the head with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is one piece of it, is that they might have been in the wrong system,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how their workflows work, the number
Mm-hmm.
of clients they have. And that's part of what we normally start when we start working with a client. We will say, are you open to switching? Because we actually don't think you're in the right one. So
Mm-hmm.
that is something, like, maybe
Okay.
they hate it because it just isn't working for them because of the way they do their work.
Yeah.
The other piece is that almost all the other times,
Mm-hmm.
they're just not using it right.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to understand what goes into a project management system and everything. You don't have post-it notes. You don't have Slack conversations about work being done. Slack is not a project management system. That is for urgent questions that you need a response right now.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else should have a place in the project management system, either associated with a project or associated with a task.
Mm.
And that is such a hard concept. And Monday's a really popular one because of the amount of marketing Monday has done.
Yeah.
And it's great, but a client they've never set up their Monday correctly right off the bat.
Mm.
They're using it for a personal task management system,
Uh,
meaning, like, I've got a board for TJ and I've got a board for Alane, and I'm just managing my tasks. None of it is built out as a workflow for a project or for even managing a client or anything. And so that's such a common piece. It's like, well, you're just not even using it right.
yeah.
And I got really frustrated one day, just in my own, like, hiring, because we have training built out and onboarding for every team member we bring on.
Mm-hmm.
And we use ClickUp internally. And so we have a ClickUp training. I got so frustrated one day, and I'm going, we're giving this massive training to them, and they haven't even been using ClickUp yet.
Mm,
We just need to tell them the basics. Day one, what do you need to know to get through your ClickUp?
mm,
And I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been doing this with our clients too,
yeah.
is we're shoving way too much up front to them. They've been
Hmm.
using it wrong, but they don't know the right way. At the same time, we're trying to change how they're using it. They don't even have the basics.
Yeah,
And
I
so
can
we've
totally
started
agree with
creating
that.
just basic course. Like we have 3 courses that are the basics so
Hmm.
that A1, this is how you use it. And then we can build on that.
Yeah, that definitely seems smarter because I feel like if you try to go kind of all into it, you inevitably resort to the workarounds and all the stuff that come up because you're like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm just gonna use it this way. Like I'm
Hmm.
just gonna kind of
Hmm.
make it work for me, as opposed to if you kind of step people into it. Here's sort of the foundational things, and then it's like, here's another neat feature that you can use. And imagine if you used it this way, then it would help with this. Oh, okay. But
Hmm.
uh, I know many times, like going into like a new system at an agency, and you just, if you don't have that kind of walk into it, you are immediately overwhelmed, immediately
Hmm.
frustrated, slightly angry, and
Hmm.
resistant as a result. And then you create your own workarounds immediately, and that's the wrong way to
Yeah.
use it.
Yeah. And to your point that we were talking about earlier, just, teams have their own ways of doing things. Like my team does
Mhm.
it this way. This team over here manages things this way. We see the same thing on a project management level,
Oh yeah.
that each person manages it differently and each manager manages, and there's no consistent way throughout the company. So
Hmm.
it's chaos in there, just
Yeah.
like we were talking about earlier. It's such chaos.
Yeah. I can believe it. And I also, to your point earlier about like using Slack and I've been at agencies where they use Teams messaging, like
Yeah.
in lieu of the project management software sometimes, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, again, it's, well, this person likes to just dump stuff in a messaging thread. This person uses the project management software for some things, but then occasionally things come up, but it's not in there, and immediately things break down.
Hmm.
And with Slack and things like that, the biggest challenge I find is like, I can't find that information because now you've had like 30 people,
Yep.
filling in. And then the conversation turned to like, cat pictures and, what I'm having
Yeah.
for dinner tomorrow night. Like, and then it comes back. So it's like, it's so impossible. So at least these programs, at least again, when they work well and you're using them right,
Hmm.
at least I kind of know like, okay, if I enter here, I can kind of
Yeah.
track the conversation in a way that your brain can absorb and then figure out, okay, now I know what to do. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything has a place,
Mm-hmm.
So I know exactly where to go to find this. It has a place that I
Mm-hmm.
can comment, talk about roadblocks, reassign to somebody else for the next steps, whatever it is.
Yeah. One of the things on the Workday Ninja site, I think, or maybe it was just on another place, but you mentioned this idea of a Workday Ninja cheat code. And I found myself intrigued by that. What is the cheat code with Workday Ninja?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But we do the automation side of things
Mm,
where it doesn't have to be everything being done manually. And a lot of what we've been talking about
mm,
does feel like it's, manual work. It's
yeah.
people doing things. But so many things now with technology can be automated. And
Hmm.
how can we reduce 40% of somebody's tedious work so they can be more creative and strategic? And they're
Mm,
not just moving, data from one place to another. And I say data, and that can kind of be a little bit disorienting, but like
yeah.
if you are the owner and you're still doing biz dev and you mark the deal as one in your CRM, then somebody manually is going and
Mm,
doing all the client onboarding tasks, transitioning your knowledge on that client to somebody that might be managing that account. Well,
mm,
how can we eliminate all of that back and forth time and reduce it to 5 minutes by you just winning the deal? So
mm,
that would be, these cheat things where it's like, hey, you don't have to be doing all this work manually. A lot of things, especially now we incorporate AI, proposal
mhm.
generation. I don't know an agency that loves creating proposals, like that
No.
is not fun. That
Yeah.
sucks. So how do
Hmm.
we desuckify it is we automate it. And so like
Mm,
one of my favorite workflows is The potential client goes into your CRM and you move them to a stage that does all the research on the company.
Mm,
And so you already have notes going into a meeting. Maybe it was a booking that you don't know them. They
yeah.
scheduled a meeting with you. You have all the notes on the company now right there in your CRM. Then
Mm,
you record the meeting with a note taker,
mm-hmm,
and you have your call notes. You put those into the CRM, and then you move it to proposal stage. And when
mm,
you move it to proposal stage, then the automation and AI reads through all of your notes from the call and then creates a proposal based on the pain points that your client discussed,
mm.
the solutions you provide from a template, and
Wow.
it's done. You can go in and just do a couple of edits, and that's a 5-minute process versus
Mm.
most people are spending about 2 hours, we found, on writing proposals, and they're doing it late in the evenings because they didn't want to
Oh,
do it
yeah.
all day.
Always. Yeah. And I'm actually jealous of the two hours on a proposal because I feel like they often can even be longer sometimes. But I love the sound of all that. And I love that we're diving into AI because I think that's definitely obviously on a lot of people's minds and how to leverage AI in smart ways. And I think there are two barriers that I think people are bumping up against right now. One, there's just so much of it. It's hard to
Mhm.
like separate the good stuff from the bad. And then there's just I think there's a little fear of like, well, is there a lot of initial legwork that goes in to get those automations running the way they need to? Meaning, am I going to have to spend a week just like configuring the system so that it works right? So, one, are you encountering any of that resistance? And if so, on either of those, do you have ways of helping people move through that resistance?
Yeah, I do a lot of speaking on this, and I'm actually really surprised at how many people are barely dabbling in it.
Mm,
Because I have AI popped up on my screen
yeah.
always, and one of the things that I've found is that people associate AI with prompt writing and going into a chat
Yeah.
GPT and thinking of it in this silo, like, okay, if I'm using AI, that means that I'm using Copilot or chat GPT or
Hmm.
something similar like that.
Yeah.
And yes, that is one way to use it. And that's very
Mhm.
manual on your time.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of platforms, that are out there now. And
Hmm.
I see it as, wow, this is really cool, but not
Yeah.
everybody does.
Sure.
But even for like a podcast, like there's AI tools out there that will you upload your episode and they're going to go ahead and pick out the chapters. It's going to go ahead and remove the
Hmm.
ums. It's going to create the transcript. It's going to create social posts for you. So it's
Hmm.
taking, even if it takes 50% of the manual work off of you,
Yeah.
it is really benefiting you in the long run by having that first stab at things being done. And the other side of it with the automation, it
Hmm.
does take time to build that out.
Yeah.
And unless you're a tech savvy person that has time on your hands, I would recommend going to a company that does this because you're going to have
Hmm.
it rolling in 30 days rather than you never finishing it or
Yeah.
never getting it right.
Yeah.
Go with somebody that can get it going in less than a month for you and you're rocking and rolling. Like that automation I mentioned
Hmm.
for the auto generation of proposals, that we could, if a company gets us linked up to their tools, we could have that done in 2 weeks. Like
Wow.
this is not a long process
Mm.
or a build out, and it's going to be done right.
Yeah.
There's always edits that you can do in the future. And that's one of the things we do see that evolves is we start working with a client and they want this automation. Okay, great. Let's do it.
Hmm.
And then it's the onion. Then they start seeing, oh, actually, like that is so helpful. And
Hmm.
now we actually can see where we were some gaps in our process or some other things we'd like to enhance. Like, can we shift it? And of course, like let's keep working through making it better for your team rather than the
Yeah.
bare minimum you were doing before.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like you accessed a piece of my brain there when you were talking about the like never getting it done thing. Like so much of this stuff, it's like, oh, that seems interesting. Let me try to figure it out. And then you eventually hit some kind of roadblock where you're like, that seems really hard. Um, I don't want to do that. And then,
Yeah.
you keep kind of maybe coming back to it because you realize like, I don't want to keep doing these things, but like eventually you have to kind of go, okay, I need to talk to an expert here
Yeah.
on whatever it is. I mean, even as simple as like, when I decided I wanted to create some clips from the podcast episodes. Like, I could do that myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do that myself. And for a while, I knew there were programs out there that were doing it, but I just was resisting it. And then for me, it honestly, what helped was having somebody say, like, I'm using this one.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that referral thing, and it's like, that's where I see so much benefit in AI, is where suddenly it's like a thing that would probably take me 4 or 5 hours takes me like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. The Chat GPT is where people are getting exposure to it, and that can still feel so much like work.
Mm-hmm.
That these other tools that just do it for you, I don't think people are expecting that to actually work.
Yeah. I mean, and what I really like about the tools that are built around specific things, like the podcast one that we were talking about, is they already have it dialed in for the right prompt. Like, it's doing all the hard work for you that you wouldn't have to go to ChatGPT and be manually doing. And that is dependent on how well your prompt writing is. And if you're depending on each team member to do it themselves, then you're going to get different results.
Yeah.
And so, if you find a tool that's specifically for what you're doing, it's going to come out the best way it can each time, instead of inconsistent, or even the time for you to go and use ChatGPT to do it. Now, I still use ChatGPT. There's still a place for that.
Sure.
But, there's tools or even automation that could be used so that it's just going to do it the same way and the right way every time.
Yeah, I like that. And I imagine a lot of folks would appreciate that, because I think to the extent that folks are dabbling, they're dabbling and occasionally feeling frustrated. And, some people are not dabbling, maybe more because they're afraid of AI taking their jobs, taking over the world, and creating some kind of dystopian future. And I don't dismiss that fear, meaning like anything's possible, but I'd rather like approach it with optimism and possibility and think like, how can these tools save me some of the stuff I don't love doing so that I can maybe do more of the stuff I like doing, or maybe think about new ways of doing business that I would never have had time to think about before, because now I have that extra time. But I understand the fears. I want to shift gears a little bit. I don't know if you still work in this company, but I found it really interesting. So I'm curious, Arvo, is that a company you still work?
Yeah, that's my software that we built.
So that sounds really interesting to me. And maybe if you want to take a minute just to kind of quickly explain what it does, and then I have a couple questions I think I'd love to ask about it.
Okay, yeah. So we built Arvo for creating skimmable digital assets that can be knowledge-based documents, could be how-tos and training docs, and just something that appeals to the generations that are working right now versus a black and white text document.
So what I gleaned from that and some of the stuff I saw on the site was how much of a help this could be with onboarding. You may have even had an example in there, but I think agencies in general, my experience is onboarding is actually a word that half the people may not even know what it means, because we don't really do it. Onboarding is, here's your desk, or here's your computer, and here are the 3 mandatory HR videos you need to watch, and here's the stack of paperwork you need to sign. And then you have a brief at 11 a.m. and off you go.
Yep, there you go. That's it.
Whereas like when it's done well, it's like all this stuff we're kind of talking about, the way we do things, the way we work together, the way we support each other, the systems we use suddenly come into clear view. And so if you take a little bit of time giving people some of that onboarding process, they're not immediately, first of all, lost, and then second of all, resorting to whatever habits they kind of carried from their last job. So one, am I correct that Arvo can help with that? And if so, can you add any more detail on how it can help with that?
Yeah. And it's our employee onboarding is one of the things that I'm most proud of, because that's the first impression somebody gets of our company. And so just like you said, we have we have 2 different onboardings for a new person joining our team. One is the items that need to get done for them just starting their day, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is such a crucial piece that I'm glad that you mentioned, because 84% of small businesses are not ready for their employee to start their first day of work.
I believe
And they're
that.
sitting around waiting, and you just spend
Mhm.
all this time interviewing and hiring, and they show up at work, whether physically or online, and they're waiting. And
Mhm.
so we have, every time that we're kicking off a new employee, we have a new employee checklist for everything, every access point, everything that they need. So on their first day, they have the access that they need.
Mm.
And then when they are done getting all their access set up, then they move into our onboarding and training piece.
Okay.
And that has Arvo. So we use ClickUp, like I mentioned,
Mhm.
for managing the tasks of it.
Right.
But Arvo, we call them playbooks, but it's
Okay.
basically like a how-to document. We call
Cool.
them playbooks.
Mhm.
A playbook is linked in the description of every single training task,
Mm.
because how we use ClickUp, most companies are not using their project management system how we use it, and they
Okay.
want to Slack us all day.
Mhm.
No, you need to know how we use these platforms and why. And that's actually the first thing, is how we use these platforms and why. And it's
Mhm.
just like that, the first handful of them, that we use, and that has a playbook. And I've got Loom videos embedded in the playbooks from
Mhm.
Arvo that are in there. And
Nice.
every single platform has a how-to that we use, so that when they're done, they know how to use the systems, and then we can focus on how they do their job. But if they don't know how to use the systems, holy cow, is it a scramble?
Yeah, I can believe that. Yeah, and I think it often is. And I think, in the agency world, you also deal with a lot of freelancers and contractors. And if you don't have some kind of turnkey way of helping people understand how you work, it's even more chaotic, because you might have somebody who's only there for a few weeks to kind of
Mhm.
try to jump in, and they're spending a week just lost. And like,
Running in
I've been in
circles.
places where like people like basically come around and go like, I don't know if I can do this, because I don't even know how to, like, where to insert myself into any of this stuff. It just feels like I'm just getting stuff from every direction. And it's like, yeah, you probably are. And I'm sorry, but we need to work on our systems. And so I think the beauty of that onboarding kind of process, like, it's great for the full timers to really immerse and get into it. But I imagine it really helps with folks who are coming in for a contract or something and just need to get it quickly.
Yeah, we even have a version of it if we're hiring a freelancer on Upwork. And,
Mm.
what is it that we're hiring you to do? Here's some context. Like, we have a little system, and it's always so cool to see the messages that we get from either our employee after their first week, or even, like I mentioned, an Upwork contractor, is, this was the best onboarding experience I've ever had.
Hmm.
I'm so excited to be part of the team.
Oh, that's
And it's
awesome.
like, man, that's your first impression.
Yeah.
And people that are onboarded correctly they stay longer. Like, there's so much stats out there.
Hmm.
And this was one of the things that I mentioned, that when we sucked as an organization in my last company, this
Yeah.
was one of the things that we started to change, was how we onboarded our employees. And every single detail we spent time on. Even we realized not everybody uploaded a Slack profile picture,
Mm.
and instead it just had the little icon there. And
Hmm.
and even that was like mentally disappointing for our team, that they didn't upload a photo. Okay, well, great, let's just add that to their
Right.
onboarding and
Hmm.
how to go along with it. So it was every detail. And for somebody listening, they might go, oh my gosh, that's so overwhelming. It doesn't need to be perfect. You
Right.
can build on it. Just get something, even if it's two things. What are your two
Hmm.
most important platforms? Record a Loom video. My favorite thing to do, because we have Arvo, and Arvo is it's a SaaS, so anybody can sign up for it,
Hmm.
is I record a Loom video. I run the transcript through AI and Arvo. You can use ChatGPT or there's a prompt right there in Arvo,
Hmm.
and take the transcript and say, write me a step-by-step process using this video transcript. And
Mm.
it will write you a step-by-step process.
Right.
You have it in Arvo right there. You have a video walkthrough and a step-by-step guide. And now it is in a knowledge base that people can search and find.
Mm.
They don't need to ask you, or you don't need to be frustrated that they didn't know to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people would appreciate all of that. And I think for a lot of folks, the simple act of, like you say, just going through this process and acknowledging one that it's an important process, and then creating something, I think already puts you ahead of, the vast majority of folks who are having that, like, I'm not ready, that 84%, I'm not even ready for somebody. If you're at least ready and you've got like, hey, upload your Slack photo, and here's at least a quick intro to ClickUp or whatever that like takes you through something, like, better than nothing. Maybe that you schedule a lunch with your supervisor too as part of that process or whatever. Like the experience of coming and waiting in some ways, I think, is almost worse than coming and being like, have the fire hose turned on you. Like, because it's like, do they even need me? Like suddenly your brain goes to like, what did I get into? I'm like, nobody's talking to me. I don't.
Yeah, it frames the negativity. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like just it's 2 or 3 steps that feel like, oh, I'm now here. Like they were ready for me. They were prepared for me. They want me here, because I think that's what it can feel like a little bit. Oh, do you even care that I'm here? You didn't even get ready for me. Like, what is that saying to a new employee? I can't imagine much good. Yeah.
Can I tell you my favorite piece of it?
Yeah.
So this was an accident. We had done a team building thing internally, and we built everybody did a personality test, and then we built a playbook on ourselves. So I had our personality test results in there and a few other things about us, because our team's around the world. Yeah. And our team loved it so much because we got to know each other outside of just the time that we were working on a task together, you know? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try, we were hiring a new marketing manager. I was like, I'm going to put my personality playbook in an email. 2 days before she starts, I'm going to just say, hey, we're so excited that you're joining us. Just so you know a little bit more about me, here's my personality playbook. And then here is your other manager's personality playbook, so you can learn about us. And your first couple of days, you get to create your own, so we can learn about you.
That's so smart.
It was such a hit. The lady that we hired, she was so excited. She said she was at the hair salon when she got my email, and she walked around and showed everybody there who she was going to work with. She sent it to her friends, and she was so proud of the company that she was joining. That's what you want. You want these champions before their first day. And it was we were so like, we had no idea it would like make an impact like that. We were, just kind of like winging it. And now it's a part of our process, because you get to see what manager or entry level or across the world in different time zones, different roles, you get to see the similarities that you have with somebody, what you have in common. And like, I hired a lady across the world, and she plays tennis and I play tennis. And then a different one, she likes to drink wine and climb mountains. I like to do those things. And it started to break down the barriers of getting to know each other right off the bat, that we'd have commonalities to share instead of trying to get to know each other. And how was your weekend? It was good. Like I immediately had things to connect on. And so that's the one that I'm most proud of in creating, and just seeing what an impact something so small like that can do.
I love that. And I think a lot of companies would benefit from something like that. I think we can often forget the human side of things, and the fact that like when you show up to a company, like you're a little nervous, like, who am I going to be working with? Who are these people? I met like 3 people on the interview, but now I'm going to be working with however many people, and I don't know. And so the comfort that comes with, I have something in common with these folks, and also just, again, the signal that it sends, like, we care about you as a person. We want to get to know you as a person, and we're open and vulnerable enough to be willing to share our own profile so that you can see a little bit about us. Like, all of those things, simple, but really powerful, I think, for helping people to feel welcomed. And that's like, that's when people feel welcomed, and then they ultimately feel more included. Like, we know all the data around those things, that people then feel more engaged at work, and more engagement at work means all the good productivity and all that stuff that ultimately businesses, on the bottom line, care about. So it just it makes sense to me. you know.
Yeah, I'll send you mine and we can link to it in the show notes. And
Oh,
I built mine
awesome.
in Arvo, so I built a little
Okay.
personality playbook.
Oh, that's really fun. Yeah, please do. That sounds fun. Um, I want to come back to some of the tools that you work with and maybe a little bit about the AI systems and mention a question from our last guest. I will ask each guest to give a question to the next one. So our last guest was Renee Bryant, and she works in the world of play for adults. So she creates spaces and programs where people can learn to play, and it kind of unlocks creativity, particularly in the workplace, but just in life in general. And she personally mentioned that, she has ADHD and she can feel overwhelmed by the choices and the possibilities in all of these AI driven systems. And she's thinking like, I would love to find tools that can help me sort of outsource some of the organization in my life. And so she's wondering, and you may not know this, but I'm curious, are there automated like personal assistants or something like that out there that actually help you get organized and they are actually prompting you? I think this was the one area that was a sticking point. She doesn't want to have to come up with the prompts to she wants to be just asked questions and then answer. Have you heard of anything like that? And if so, what's out there?
There's some things around AI agents that
Okay.
can be used for something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
you could actually, like, we have an AI one built out for our own team to
Mm-hmm.
prompt us on a daily basis to
Mm.
do things. And so, those, and it depends on how much time and effort and resources you have to build
Yeah.
out something like that. But
Yeah.
it is doable. And I love that what she does as a job to,
Mm-hmm.
or her business. And
Yeah.
have you ever read the book Essentialism?
I don't know that I have. I think I've heard of
It's
it
all
though.
about just sticking with what's essential in
Mm.
your life or your purpose and letting go of everything else because we're
Mm.
all just inundated with too much.
Oh yeah.
And one of the key pieces that he talks about is play. As an
Yeah.
adult, we need to be playing. Like, we have
Mm-hmm.
forgotten how to enjoy ourselves. And I have even seen, and I saw this in myself, where professionally, I was so obsessed with being a professional that I forgot to just be me.
Mm. Yeah.
And how do I unwind that? And like, even in social situations where I'm just like, I've got to be me and I need to dress this way and I need to look this way. I just got so caught up in all this, like I couldn't just have fun anymore. And
Mm.
I've had over the last few years just be like, Alane, you can relax. You can just be yourself. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to worry about all these things. You can play and enjoy yourself. And I've been able to start sharing more information about myself
Mm.
rather than only sticking to professional career, work related things. Like, I like to drink wine and go hiking or,
Yeah.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that she's doing that, because I think a lot of adults are suffering from the same thing.
Yeah.
And the more we always talk about this work-life balance because we're suffering from the work side of things, that
Mm-hmm.
we are losing the time to just enjoy, have fun, and relax.
Yeah. I fully agree with that. And I think one of the things that she talks about is how if you just embrace that more playful mindset, the one we all kind of had when we were kids, it ultimately actually results in you being more effective at the things you want to do. It kind of unlocks a lot of stuff inside of us. So, not that you necessarily should be using play as like a productivity tool, but more just like if you embrace
Yeah,
that
I'm going to
mindset.
schedule it in. I'm going to get
Exact,
playtime right now.
exactly. Play, damn it. And like
Yeah.
it's just that it's just a natural outcome of it. It de-stresses and frees up our brain in ways that if we're out there trying to solve all the big, hairy problems in the world, you can't really do that if you're sort of boxed in and forcing yourself. The looseness
Yeah.
that comes with play actually like allows all those neurons to connect in new ways versus you constantly kind of putting the same two neurons together and going, give me a different answer, damn it. It's like, it doesn't work that way. So I think there's some real beauty in it. And then your life is just more enjoyable because you're actually having fun more of the time. So yeah, I think she's a really interesting guest. I can't wait to get that out there. And then I want to give you a chance to ask a question for our next guest. So our next guest is Siobhan McHale, and she works with organizations, helping them work through change. And she has written a book called The Hive Mind at Work, Harnessing the Power of Group Intelligence to Create Meaningful and Lasting Change. And I'd love to know if you have a question we can pass along to her.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this episode because I want to listen to it after it goes live.
Yeah.
Because of the work that she does, and especially with when you look at global teams, and it looked like she has a lot of experience with that. And what has she seen in cultural differences and how that plays into change management? And selfishly, I want to know because that's what we do is change management, and really that cultural difference. And then how can we as leaders account for those with global teams?
That's a great question, and I imagine she definitely has an answer to it. And I think just being curious about that is already like a good step, to like think like, how does that work? Yeah, I'm very curious to see where that answer comes. And I'll let you know when the episode goes live so you can get a chance to hear it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think as Americans, we think, well, this is the way we do things, so everybody does it like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to stereotype, but that's the feeling that I get.
I think that's true. And I imagine that there's probably some degree of truth to that, to every culture to some degree. You know what you know, and then we instinctively run through the lens of our own thinking when we're trying to understand what other people might want, rather than, really being curious, like, what's going on for you? How does this show up for you? What matters to you? And how do we make that work? Yeah, I love it. I want to come back to you talked about some of the challenges people are facing in the workplace today, kind of on that suck meter that, a lot of folks are struggling and trying to figure things out. So I wonder for you, if you think about, if you could wave a magic wand and create a more fully desuckified work world, what does that look like to you?
A place that people can go into work with the purpose that they enjoy doing, and that they can just get their work done and get out of office, because we all want to be done and do the things that we also enjoy outside of work. And so my magic wand just looks like me as a owner. I don't have to think, why don't they know how to do this? Why can't they just get their job done? But on their end, that they just get in there, they crush their day, they love what they do because it's their purpose in life. And then they get to leave work and go do the other things that they love and enjoy.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. And I think, to the work you're doing, it's like, so much of what causes frustration when you're at work, 10, 11 hours instead of, 8, like would maybe be more ideal, is the fact that you're not spending 10 or 11 hours working in your purpose and working on what you feel really matters. You're spending at least half that time sorting through, chaotic process and trying to track that Slack chain where you're like, wait, where was that little nugget that I saw 2 hours ago that I don't remember anymore? And it's that stuff that like builds that like frustration that just builds up in us. It's like, oh my God, like I'm like, I can barely like get out of my own way stuff versus it just being smooth and immersed. So I love that vision. And I love that you're helping to help people step into that vision a little more. So that's awesome. Speaking of play, I want to have a little fun here. I use a lot of sound effects in this show, which if you've listened, you've probably heard I lean towards cat sounds personally. I'm a huge cat fan, but I always ask the guests to add to our growing library of desuckified sound effects. So do you have a sound that you are open to making for us here and sharing with everyone?
Yes. And I'll say I'm most nervous about this.
It's all right.
It's so scary to do this for me. So one that my son and I do a lot are bum, bum, bum.
Like that dramatic moment kind of thing. Yeah. I love that one. Yeah. My wife and I actually do that sometimes.
Yeah, we do. We read at night together, and books and movies, they love to leave you on a cliffhanger. So the end of the chapter is always a cliffhanger for us. And so we do that at the end of every chapter. So that was the first thing that I thought of.
I love that. I think that's a really fun sound. And I think sometimes the world can feel like we're in some of those bum moments where it's like, what's going to happen next? So if I was to circle this back again to the work you do, you help people maybe have less of those moments because they can understand what's coming next because you've allowed the process to make sense. And it's like, now I just know what I need to do. And there's not that cliffhanger moment of like, now what?
Yeah, it's just a beautiful flowing river.
Yeah. I love that. And you did awesome, by the way, on the sound. So there's no reason to be afraid, but I get the fear. It's a little weird and different, so I can appreciate that. So I would love for people to be able to learn more about what you're putting into the world and dig even deeper. So what are the best ways for people to find you online?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so I'd love for you to reach out to me. I'm Alane Boyd, and my website is workdayninja.com. And I've got free resources on there. You can scroll down to resource section. There's a couple of tools that can be really helpful for you, whether you're trying to pick a project management system or do any automation like we've been talking about.
That's awesome. I will add all of that to the show notes as well, so folks can catch up with that, and also your personality.
Yes, I will send that over to you.
Yeah, because I think that'll be really fun as well. Well, Alane, this has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you coming on and just sharing a lot of information that I think can help a lot of people. And I think that's and it's information that will definitely help Desuckify Work if people can start to bring a little more clarity to their process at work and move away from the chaos that so many of us have been swimming in for far too long. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I hope that it does all of those things.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Alane. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the Desuckify Work podcast. And a huge thanks to Alane for bringing smart, strategic, solution-oriented thinking to the show. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share, rate, review, subscribe, or consider shaving your eyebrows and penciling in Desuckify above one eye and work above the other. Don't forget to add the circle R, unless you want the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office all up in your business. You can follow Alane on LinkedIn and check out her site at workdayninja.com. It's loaded with tools, tips, and training to help agencies get out of their way. My site and my Substack newsletter are loaded with cool stuff too. Check them out if you can. I'm on a mission to make work suck less, and I'd love for you to join me. Want to make that desuckification happen ASAP? Let's set up a free half-hour coaching session. Bye, everyone.